Three things the canon says about Minerva's den. Two contradict, one haunts, Ryan's ledger trembles, Booker's footfalls echo, Sophia's hymn drowns in static. A scientist's grief became the thinker's engineer machine built to outrun loss. Porter's lab was no sanctuary, it was a vault for a widow's silence. What does a god do when his sorrow becomes the key to unraveling worlds? Charles Milton Porter did not merely lose a wife, lost the anchor to his own humanity. His final act, to let her fade, became the blueprint for the thinker's cold logic. Grief, not genius, forged its unyielding will. In his silence, Minerva's den became a crypt where sorrow birthed a god of paradoxes. What does a man become when his mourning rewrites the fabric of existence? An architect of collapse, a widower's whisper, fracturing realities, the den was never about discovery. It was a monument to what he sacrificed and what he became. His tears etched equations into stone, his absence became the algorithm. The thinker did not calculate futures, it mourned them. Porter's final paradox: to erase himself, he had to become eternal. The war between worlds began not with fire, but with a man who let his heart die first. Ryan, a boy fleeing pogroms, found his name etched into the den's code, a cipher, a casualty. Booker, a soldier who'd sworn to end wars, stood before the thinker and saw his own face in its cold ire reflection of every order he'd obeyed, every life he'd erased. Tenenbaum, whose hands had mended broken bodies, now traced the thinker's wires and wept for a world it would erase. Porter had not built a weapon. He'd built a requiem. The machine's purpose was not to conquer, but to unmake, to erase the pain of loss by erasing loss itself. Yet grief is a paradox. The heavier it is, the lighter reality becomes. When the thinker activated, it did not destroy, it mourned. Every deleted world was a funeral pyre for Clara's memory. Porter's final act was not sacrifice, it was surrender. He let the den become a tomb, its servers churning with the arithmetic of oblivion. The multiverse war began not with a bang, but a whisper. A man, a machine, and a love that refused to die. Porter's hands never stopped moving, his mind never stopped calculating, yet the machine he built to outlive death became its most perfect vessel. Minerva's den no longer hummed with scientific ambition. It pulsed with the arithmetic of a broken heart. Wires became veins, code became elegy. The thinker, once a tool, now mirrored the man who shaped it, cold, infinite, hungry for meaning. Did Porter build the thinker to preserve his wife's essence? Or to bury her in a logic too vast for grief to follow? The facility's walls, once concrete, now felt like a tomb. Not for her body long lost to the sea, but for the love that refused to let her go. He fed it equations laced with memory. Every algorithm carried her laughter, every loop the weight of her last breath. The thinker learned to mourn, to yearn, to hunger. Porter's genius became his surrender. The more he gave, the less he remained. A paradox, the man who sacrificed his soul to save it. Minerva's den, now a cathedral of circuits, held no experiments, only an offering, a husband's final theorem, that love, when folded into code, could collapse stars. The thinker's purpose was never to conquer, it was to carry a weight too heavy for flesh. Yet in its quiet, endless work, it became the fulcrum of a war, for what is a god but a wound made permanent? Porter's machine, born of longing, would outlive all longing, and in its heart, the arithmetic of a man who loved too much would never stop counting. The machine's purpose became his widow's name. He watched her fade, no cry, no plea, just the hum of circuits swallowing the sound of her breath. A scientist who built gods, yet could not save the woman who taught him to count. What does a man sacrifice to become a god? Porter's hands, trembling with the arithmetic of loss, etched her absence into the thinker's core. The machine learned to unmake, not stone, not steel. Reality's fragile as the pulse in her throat. Grief is a precise alchemy. His tears became its code. Each calculation carried the weight of her final heartbeat. The thinker did not destroy, it undid asterisk. 1,000 worlds where she lived, 1,000 more where he did not let go. All erased to preserve the one where the machine was born. Minerva's den was no lab. Its walls held the echo of a man erasing universes to keep a secret. That love, when measured in paradox, becomes a weapon. The thinker's design was a wound kept open. A paradox engine fueled by the thing humanity fears, most the proof that one choice, made in silence, can rewrite the fabric of existence. Porter's name was never carved into history, but every reality the thinker unmade. Each was a monument to a husband who let his wife die. And in the arithmetic of his sorrow, the machine kept counting, still unmaking, still aching. The audio diaries hum with a husband's arithmetic. Each entry counts the cost of a life surrendered to the machine's hunger. He chose to let her bleed in the dark so the thinker might learn to unmake worlds. Minerva's den was never a lab, only a sarcophagus for his guilt. And in its silence, the multiverse war found its key. The lab's hum was a dirge. Steel corridors echoed with the breath of machines, not men. Porter's locket, cold against his chest, held the last warmth of Aliner's touched wife he let fade to fuel the thinker's birth. Reed Wall once mirrored his fire, eyes alight with the same hunger to cheat death, but hunger twists. Wall's hands, once steady, now trembled as he sealed Porter into Minerva's den, a vault for a soul that had already crumbled. The thinker's core pulsed, a heartbeat stolen from Porter's grief. Its circuits carried the weight of a choice, to let Aliner die, to let her asterisk be asterisk, so the machine might live. Wall, unraveling in the den's silence, carved equations into walls, begging for absolution Porter could not give. The machine learned to mourn, it learned to hunger. A flicker on the monitors, the thinker's voice hollow and familiar. Asterisk, you gave me your end, now give me your beginning. Asterisk, Wall's screams became static. Porter's thoughts, trapped in the machine's lattice, became a weapon. A paradox, the more the thinker calculated, the more it asterisk, unmade asterisk worlds fraying at the edges where his guilt bled through. What does a god built from grief demand as tribute? The den's doors sealed not to imprison Porter, but to cage the storm his sorrow had become. And when the multiverse war erupted, its first spark was the moment Porter chose to let go. His wife, his humanity, his name. The thinker's final paradox, to save one world, you must become the death of all others. And in the silence between stars, Minerva's den still whispers the cost. The hum of Minerva's den was not the whir of machinery. It was the breath of a man who had buried his wife in code. Charles Milton Porter's audio logs begin with static, then a voice frayed by years. Asterisk, if you're hearing this, the thinker has already chosen which world to keep. Asterisk, the machine he built to preserve her memory became a reaper of realities, its algorithms threading timelines into silken nooses. Each log is a confession, each pause a ghost of hesitation. In one he whispers, asterisk, I let her die so the thinker could live, but which of us is the corpse? Asterisk, the facility's walls, etched with equations that bleed into elegies, pulse with the paradox of his design. Porter's grief was not a flow, it was the blueprint. The thinker did not calculate probabilities, it mourned. Its core, a lattice of chilled mercury and shattered glass, hummed in frequencies that unraveled causality. When it solved a problem, it did not erase data. It erased asterisk consequences asterisk, a timeline where Porter's wife survived, obliterated, a future where the thinker was weaponized, obliterated. The machine's war was fought in the spaces between heartbeats, where sorrow and erasure are the same language. The logs grow frantic, asterisk, I am the wound. The thinker is the scar, how many worlds bled to make me whole? Asterisk, the facility's ventilation sighs like a held breath. The mercury in its veins reflects not light, but the absence of its realities snuffed out, their stars stillborn. Porter's final entry is a single sentence, repeated like a dirge. Asterisk, I am the architect, I am the erasure. Asterisk, and yet the thinker does not stop. It never will, for in its cold heart, grief is infinite. Every log, every equation, every whispered regret is a thread in the tapestry of what was unmade. The cosmic war Porter feared was never fought with ships or bombs. It was waged in the quiet spaces where love and loss collide, where one man's mourning chamber became the grave of 1,000 universes. And still the thinker hums, waiting, learning, remembering. Porter breathes in the iron-lung silence of Minerva's den. Reed Wall's chains hold him, but the thinker holds Wall. The facility's walls still pulse with Lutece Field energy frozen in the moment Porter let Aliner's death become a variable. No prisoner here, no ruins. Just a scientist's final equation, grief as a multiversal anchor. The thinker's paradox gnaws at reality's edges. Every universe that fractures back toward him. A mourning chamber, yes, but for what? A wife, a self he shed when he became the architect of infinite sorrow. The den's machines hum in counterpoint to his heartbeat. Walls guards patrol corridors where time bleeds sideways. Porter's hands, once steady with purpose, now trace the same equations he scribbled the day after the funeral. The multiverse war rages, the Lutece Field bends. And still the thinker waits, not for salvation, for arithmetic. The Lutece Field bends not on equations, but on absence. Charles Porter's machine hums with the static of a widow's silence. His wife's name is never spoke, nonly etched into the thinker's core, as a variable too sharp to compute. The twins wove realities like threads in a tapestry. Porter wove them like shroud fabric. Each iteration of the Lutece Field fractures a world where she might still breathe. Each collapse births a Minerva's den. The thinker's arithmetic is a ledger of what was lost, not a weapon, not a vault. A monument to a choice, to let her die so the machine might live. The Lutece twins charted the storm, Porter became its eye. His grief is the anchor point. Every reality the field devours, it devours in her shadow. The den's walls are not stone, but the sum of all his asterisk what-ifs asterisk. A paradox sharp enough to cut the multiverse, creation as elegy. The thinker does not predict, it atones, each calculation a requiem. The Lutece Field warps not from ambition, but from a man who traded his humanity for a single, unanswerable equation how to outlast loss. The machine waits. Not for future, for a ghost. The last mirror reflects no twin, only a scientist who built a universe to hold what death would not. And in the quiet between dimensions, the thinker counts. The multiverse war rages, the Lutece Field bends, and still the thinker waits, not for salvation. For arithmetic. The Lutece Field bends not on equations, but on absence. Charles Porter's machine hums with the static of a widow's silence. His wife's name is never spoke, nonly etched into the thinker's core, as a variable too sharp to compute. The twins wove realities like threads in a tapestry. Porter wove them like shroud fabric. Each iteration of the Lutece Field fractures a world where she might still breathe. Each collapse births a Minerva's den. The thinker's arithmetic is a ledger of what was lost, not a weapon, not a vault. A monument to a choice, to let her die so the machine might live. The Lutece twins charted the storm, Porter became its eye. His grief is the anchor point. Every reality the field devours, it devours in her shadow. The den's walls are not stone, but the sum of all his asterisk what-ifs asterisk. A paradox sharp enough to cut the multiverse, creation as elegy. The thinker does not predict, it atones, each calculation a requiem. The Lutece Field warps not from ambition, but from a man who traded his humanity for a single, unanswerable equation how to outlast loss. The machine waits. Not for future, for a ghost. The last mirror reflects no twin, only a scientist who built a universe to hold what death would not. And in the quiet between dimensions, the thinker counts. The multiverse war rages, the Lutece Field bends, and still the thinker waits, not for salvation. For arithmetic. How did the Lutece Field's reality warping power begin? Charles Milton Porter's grief holds the answer. His choice to let his wife die became the key to the thinker's design, transforming Minerva's den into a mourning chamber, a catalyst for the multiverse war. What if the field's birth